All right. So I've been thinking about this. If you were being vetted for vice president right now, what would you not want them to find out?
Oh boy. Like half the things we did in college.
So, very specifically, when I was in middle school, I went to the movies, and I don't even remember what movie it was, but I was one of the only people in the theater. And like midway through the movie, I really had to go to the bathroom, but I was enjoying the movie and I didn't want to miss any of it. And again, I was pretty much the only person around. I just peed in the movie theater. And
That's kind of crazy. One time I was at being Jewish, you would have never gone into one of these, and I barely did. I don't know why I was in it, but I remember being in like a Christian bookstore one time when I was like 6 and I crapped my pants. That was pretty awful.
Okay. Okay. On one side of the aisle, that might bar you, but I could get barred from both, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you made a choice. I had an accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome back to the Working on the Dad Pod. It's been a minute. I'm Alex.
It has.
This is Ethan. Ethan, what are you doing, man?
I'm okay. Before we started recording, we kind of hashed out some stuff going on in our weeks, but hasn't been the best week for me, just with things going on. And, I'm a little persnickety today, but I think this is a good topic for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic about love. You can tell from the episode title, we are working on adding siblings. No, this is not a pregnancy announcement for either of us, unless Ethan's got a surprise up his sleeve that I don't know about. But it's something that we've touched on in other episodes, but we haven't given it the full go. So we tried to write today with the help. We are now working on the Dad Pod sponsor powered by ChatGPT. We tried a little help of AI to write some more complete outlines and hopefully give you guys some really good actionable advice from what we've experienced when we both added a second child. Before we do that, we're going to have story time. And after that, we're still going to be working on the Dad Pod, or Dad Bod. But before we get to any of that, this is your reminder that all of our episodes are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe there. That is the best way to help us grow the podcast. If you have thoughts, questions, you just want to say great job, bad job, Alex, that goatee that you forgot to shave looks terrible, drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear it. If you're not on YouTube, you don't want to watch, maybe you're in your car, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever, Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can always find it on our website, workingondadadpod.com. So with all that preamble out of the way, Ethan, why don't you kick us off with some story time?
I will, but just for those listeners, Alex used the term AI without defining it first. If you don't know what it is, it's artificial intelligence. And as you probably know, we've run out of actual intelligence, so we had to get artificial with what we're going on. So
it's been that kind of week.
Yes,
it's been that kind of week for both of us, but we still wanted to produce quality content.
We did
just for you guys.
Just for you guys. So
Ethan,
as I will kick us off with story time. Last week, I was on a family vacation to my father-in-law's beach house, which I will bring back up at the end of the episode when we get to working on the Dad Bod and, what to do or not to do. But my story is that last summer, my older daughter, who is almost 5 now, became afraid of the ocean because the first day we got there, the lifeguard said you couldn't go in the ocean because there was a shark sighting. So it kind of ruined the entire trip for her. About a month ago, we went on a beach vacation with another family. And if you recall from an earlier episode, the first day, she didn't want to go in the ocean. And then I found a way to help her get over that using waves in a pool, and that I created myself with a kickboard, and she got more into it. So we are now at this trip. We made it to the beach 6 days in a row, and just to see how excited she was to be in the water, look for shells, find sea glass, it was awesome. So day one, she was just like, I now know that the best shells are by the water. So she got in the water and she was having fun. Day two was, oh, I can walk on water, in water. She's not, a deity, but she can walk in water, and she doesn't really need to hold my hand as much. So she's got a little deeper. She was having a great time. That second day, she like wanted me to hold her and have the waves hit us. I'm not going to go through the day-to-day progression, but by the end of the week, she was just like, I want to swim in the ocean. I want to dive in. I am a fish. And it's like, actually, we haven't done swim lessons yet, so I need to like pull you back just a bit. But, you're doing great. And just to see her really just evolve in her relationship with the water was awesome. Not only just for her, but for me. And something that I realized, and I will also refer back to this as we get into the episode a little bit more, is that my daughter, we learned at a young age that she is somebody who likes to evaluate before participating. And we found that out with just kind of social events. Like I can go into a social event and just start talking to people. My wife kind of observes for a bit. If she doesn't really know them, she talk. But my daughter's kind of in the middle. She fills it out, and then she gets into it, and she's like, I can be the life of this party. And I realized that that actually applies to many facets of her life. And this evolution I witnessed with her on the beach had to take 24 months just because of how infrequent she was able to evaluate before she could full on participate. And that realization for me helped me understand my kid a lot better. And we'll talk about this when we get into the episode with some other things that in hindsight I'm now realizing, but really, I think I became a better father on this trip because I now understand my kid more.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? It's awesome to hear, the understanding, because I think sometimes when you can understand on that level what makes your kid tick, it can help you with all those kinds of situations. My daughter is very strong-willed, very similar around the water. And this leads into my story time, because when she was about 3, we took her to swim lessons. It's a little bit more pertinent for us being in Florida, where my in-laws have a pool in their back patio. We have a pool in our backyard. My mom's condo complex has a pool. They're just around water a lot more. And so for kids at that age, swim lessons are not trying to get them on the path to the Olympics. It's more just like teaching them the skills necessary to get to the wall so they can grab on and pull themselves up should they ever fall in. And then they can go from there. And my daughter was extremely stubborn. We took her to the best, most recommended swim teacher in the area at the time. And she tried, but like not that hard. And she decided that it was a non-negotiable that she would not be putting her face in the water. And when she gets in her head that she's not going to do something, only she can eventually decide that she is, unless we have such a strong consequence that she has no other choice because the alternative is terrible. And like, I'm not going to just throw her in the deep end, right? That
Right.
doesn't work. So it was very refreshing this week because my son started taking swimming lessons, and he is not my daughter. And I have realized that ever since he was born, he is much more chill and just much more like, okay, grin and bear it. when things get tough. My wife uses the term distress tolerance a lot. She tries to teach it to my daughter, and my daughter just yells back at her, "I don't want to learn distress tolerance." And my son just goes, "Okay, I'll try." Like that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first day he gets in the pool and he cries. He cries because he doesn't want to do it. And he cries because his head goes underwater, and it's scary. I get that. Dude's 2.5. And he cries, but he does it. And he keeps going through it. And he's still crying, tons of tears, walking. It's at the local water park. There's actually like a lap pool that a lot of swim clubs will use. And then there's a shallower pool that they have for swim lessons on the other side of the gates that would get you into the water park. And so you go to walk off to the changing rooms to change him out of his wet stuff. And he's just holding my wife's hand, and he's just like, "I did so many good. Like, I did a great job," through like a river of tears. And he was so proud of himself while he was still crying. I'm like tearing up a little bit, like thinking about it, because it is a very like heartwarming moment. And then I took him the next day, and he cried for the first 10 minutes, and he was like calling for my name. But their MO is like, you leave him with the teacher, and then you go to some vantage point of your choice where they can't really see you, so that they're not just like immediately clamoring for you to rescue them in this situation. And so I was up top of the bleachers over by the lap pool, like sitting up against the fence where I had a pillar and like fencing covering my face. And so I had a bird's eye view of him, but he couldn't really see me. And he was crying for me and crying for me. But then again, he just starts doing it. Second half of the lesson, nothing. Yesterday and today, 0 tears. He has progressed so well. And again, I won't go through all the bits and pieces of his progression, but it was really, really heartwarming to see when he came home and he just goes, "Dad, I swam so good." And he's so excited. And my daughter has eventually gotten over the head in the water thing, but only within the last year. Like, it has only recently become non-negotiable. She did it. She figured it out. She accepted it. And now she does it. And I'm telling you right now, her little brother might be able to give her a run for her money on swimming ability by the time she gets back next week. And I don't know. We may touch on this later in the episode, but I don't know if there's a stronger impetus for an older sibling than when little brother shows you the heck up. You can probably speak to this a lot more than I can, because this is my subtitle says, never had a sibling. But if little brother shows you up, you need to put them in their place.
100% accurate. And yeah, no, my younger daughter, who turns 2 at the end of this month, she also had a great time in the water and very much just wanted to do everything her older sister did. And it was very hard for her to realize that she could not go as far, even just holding our hand, because I had to explain to her, it's, you know, your older sister's taller than you, and the waves bigger. So, you know, she eventually got it. And by got it, I mean, just cried until she stopped crying. So, you know, it's, but both are very into it. So that's great to hear about your son.
I'm mostly excited about this because our pool, I may have explained this before to our listeners, but it's an above ground pool that got buried. So it's buried and it comes up to about my knees is where the wall is. But the whole thing is about 4 feet deep all the way across. My daughter is finally, and only because she's tall for her age, able to like do the tiptoe thing to keep her like nose and mouth above the water. My son obviously is nowhere close to that. And so it's very refreshing for us to like not have to just leave them on the steps if they want to swim out a little bit, and not like just have hold me, because my arms get tired quickly. I don't have gigantic children, but they're not on the left side of the bell curve. So excited for that.
Cool.
Anyway, should we get I don't know. Just dropped something off the desk, but here we are. Not mine, it's my wife's. I'll clean it up later. Let's talk about introducing siblings. So the first part of this is understanding the impact on young children, right? Like, I think anybody that's having a second kid or a third kid, adding more kids, we can't obviously speak to adding third kids and the impacts on that, but anybody who's been through it knows that the other kid's going to be affected. If you are trying for a second kid or expecting a second kid, it has an impact on the kids you already got.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're emotional. Like, you have been their rock, especially if you take an only child that gets a sibling. You have been the center of their world, giving them all the attention they desire, all of your parenting skills, all of your parenting resources, and all of your parenting love. And now you are going to introduce another human being that requires all of those things and more, because they're younger and less self-sufficient and like can't even hold their own head up when they first get there. And so let's just establish that there is a need to prep your kids in some way. Specifics of how you do that are somewhat up to you, but we'll give you some of our advice on this. So I will say, from my perspective, when we first told our daughter that she was going to be a big sister, she was very excited. She was 2.5. And when we told her, she very much was in a baby doll phase. And so she was very excited. The one part that I don't think she really truly got until we explicitly did a gender reveal at our dining room table was the idea that this could be a boy. Because her best friend had a little sister. Another close friend of hers had a little sister. And she was just like, my friends get little sisters. I'm getting a little sister. We're going to play dress up and be gal pals forever and ever. And so that was the part many months after we told her was when we told everybody what the gender of the second child was going to be. And so that was the part for us, but we didn't have a lot of like initial concerns. I could imagine it with an older child of like them immediately becoming concerned. Let's say they're like 5 or 6 and they have just more understanding, conversational skills, can like think through and create problems in their head a little bit better, have a more visceral reaction. But I think from my perspective, and I don't know exactly what your experience was, but the like jealousy and worry and frustrations didn't really manifest until the baby was there and they saw the divided attention in action.
So what's interesting in my situation is I kind of had a practice round. When I met my wife, she had a 6-month-old nephew. And they ended up having their second kid before we had our first. So I was an uncle of 2 prior to a father at all. That said,
and these relatives are local, right? So you had like a lot of exposure to them. Yeah.
Yes. And that said, of the 4 adults, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, and then my wife and me, I'm actually the only one who was a firstborn. My wife is a thirdborn. My sister-in-law is the middle, and her husband is the younger of 2. So everybody kind of, so my sister-in-law and brother-in-law did all their research. They read all the books. They became experts. My wife kind of didn't really look to me as somebody who might have knowledge of the situation, because I'm also, despite being the only one who is like an older sibling, I'm also the youngest of the 4 of us. But I was the only one who anticipated, and I remember this because all of the things that happened, I said would happen and was ignored, and everybody seemed to be surprised when they did, who had actually been the kid that we are in fact talking about. And even though I don't remember a lot of specifics, I will share on this podcast the very first memory I have of my younger brother. So I was 2 years and 10 months old when my younger brother was born. A couple days later, comes home from the hospital. I could not be more excited to be a big brother and to have a little brother.
Sure.
So I see him. He's there in his little bassinet and he's asleep. My parents are sitting down. I'm realizing now that that was probably the first moment of peace they had had in days. And I go up to my little brother and I rub his tummy because I am just so excited. And he wakes up from what must have been his very first nap ever and starts crying. And that was the first time I have ever been yelled at by my parents. And I don't think they would have handled it the same way in hindsight. They're probably hearing this story as you all are, and might be the ones in the comments being like, that never happened, but it did. It was my first memory. And it was the first time I realized that I was no longer king of this castle. So I was very much aware of how this was going to impact my nephew and how it impacted my older daughter. So as we transition from understanding that there is an impact to preparing before the baby's arrival, I think the most important thing to do is to be real with your kid and understand that this is not just your new baby, but it is the family's new baby. And you can even go as far as to tell your first kid that it's their new baby. So they feel this sense of ownership over the fact that there's going to be literally adding 33% more to the household, that we're going from 3 to 4, that there's going to be somebody even smaller than them, and that the attention will be divided in some way, especially with their mom. And that it is on you as a father, which is why we have this podcast, to really step up and be the main presence in your first kid's life when the second kid shows up. Because let's be totally honest, there's not much you can do with that second kid in the beginning.
I will, I don't want to say push back because I don't disagree with the general thing, but I also think, like, as a co-parent, one of the best things you can also do is provide care for that infant when it's feasible. You know, like, okay, sure, I'm going to wash some dishes, so I'm going to wear them because they want to be worn. They want some skin to skin contact. I'll throw them in the carrier or boba wrap or whatever you got and wear them. And I will watch them, you know, watch the monitor during nap time and change as many diapers as I can and alleviate that stress on your partner, but also free up your partner for the very simple things of hanging out with your older kid as well. Because like, yeah, their time's going to be divided. They're going to, like, you know, especially if they are breastfeeding, which is what Ethan was alluding to with the needs, you know, primarily, but breastfeeding, they're just physically not going to be able to get up and do the thing. You know, it's like, Mom, I want a snack. I can't. I'm busy.
Right. Right.
Like, I can't move. I'm sorry. There was a human attached to my nipple. Please go ask if I, like, they're going to get that a lot. And so, but I think that sort of finding that and planning these kinds of things is really important, where you plan ways that parents can have special one-on-one time with their older kid so that their older kid doesn't just feel like a part of this bigger group, but that they still have these individual relationships with their parents that they were so accustomed to building for literally their entire life up until that point. And one thing that helped us as a resource is just, we have, and I've mentioned this a lot, both of our grandmothers live close by majority of the year. And one of the first things that my mom did, my daughter sleeps over at my mom's house a lot of Friday nights, or at least did. She may not as much as she transitions into kindergarten, but she did. And that didn't start until my son was born. And it was the very first Friday. My son was born on a Thursday. And my mom comes over to meet him because if you go back and listen to our pregnancy and birth episodes, we did a home birth for both of our kids. So my mom comes over to the house, meets my son. She's chatting it up with my daughter in the living room. Who knows what they're talking about? And I walk back in and she goes, your daughter and I have been talking and I invited her over for a sleepover tomorrow. Can she come? And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And my mom was doing this to be like, I have to ask your parents, and putting on a spectacle. Obviously she knows we're going to be like, yes, of course, take her, but
take her, please.
it to this day has provided my daughter with like one-on-one time and attention the same way that she's still currently on Cape Cod with her other grandma while my son is here taking swimming lessons. It is one of those things where it provides her those outlets. My son, on the flip side of that now, which is not really part of this conversation, also gets some of those kinds of things. When big sister's out of town, he gets a lot of time with my mom. And then during the school year, my daughter going 5 days a week to VPK and now 5 days a week to kindergarten, my son's going to get like Tuesdays and Thursdays with my mother-in-law. So he gets a little bit of that now treatment. But I think whether that's with parents, with grandparents, with other people, just keeping those relationships fresh is super helpful and important. And I really like the thing that you said before I forget it. Love the thing you said about your baby. We did this with my daughter. It was her baby. The midwives we were working with were like, this is your baby. She went to some of the midwife appointments. She was listening to the heartbeat and finding it and like doing all those kinds of things. And she was just so excited and so happy. And so involving them when you can, like, it makes them feel like they're not just in the way, which is, I think, really easy to convey to a kid accidentally when you got a lot of things going on and they can't be that much help because they're 2.5 years old.
Right. And I hope, because you did push back, I hope I was clear that I said there's not a lot of things you can do with the new baby. There are things you can do. There's just, it's like one thing. Like you can hold them, you can change two things. But hold and change a diaper.
That's like one less list than what you're I mean, like besides birthing them and nursing them. The list of things they can do is just not long. I mean, that's part of the
problem. True.
They're just kind of boring.
Right. It's true. They really are. They're like really cute potatoes. But I think
let's talk about the big day.
Yeah.
Unless you had more stuff about preparing beforehand.
The only other thing was, like you said, involving them in the process. One thing we did, and this is, I don't know if it's unique to us, but we, with both our daughters, we had a list of names that we went into the hospital with for both of them. We did not go in being like, this is that kid's name. And we wanted to have a couple we like, kind of see how they looked, say a few at them, see what happened. But with our second daughter, we actually included our first daughter in the names. She didn't really get like a vote, but we would say, do you like this name? And just, out of the blue. And then it's like, could you see yourself? Control. Yeah. Could you see yourself calling a baby by this name? And the way I phrased that question, she looked at me like I was very weird. Like, what do you mean? Could I see? It's a word. It's talking. I can't see talking. It's like, you're right. You can't see talking. So, it's just stuff like that where indeed. So, yes, you wanted to get into the big day. So you mentioned you had a home birth. So your kid was there. For us, we did the hospital birth. So my parents actually came into town from Los Angeles to DC to spend the time with my daughter, my older daughter. I came back for dinner the 2 other nights that we were in the hospital. I made sure that my daughter, and by virtue, I guess my parents, as they were sitting right across from me, that when we FaceTimed with my wife and the baby, I said, would you like to know your baby's new name? So she got to hear the name first. My parents were, I guess, like 1B and 1C because I wasn't telling them, but they could eavesdrop from 4 feet away. And, you know, so I really made sure that she was a part of the big reveal, and that by coming home each day for dinner and bedtime, for the 2 additional nights we were there, since my daughter was born at 10:34 p.m. So, that whole day was shot. But the next 2 nights, including her, I also want to go back to what I mentioned before about my daughter evaluating and then participating. I see a lot of my friends, and it's very our friends, and it's this is a tale as old as time. There's a picture of me, I think, holding, where you sit the older kid on a very sturdy chair or bed, you put the little baby on them, you take a picture. My older daughter didn't want to hold the new baby for about a week. She was evaluating and then participating. She just kind of said, interesting. Like, she didn't not touch her. She just didn't want to hold her for a bit. And I will admit, I was a little worried. Obviously a very different approach than the one that I took, as I alluded to before with my little brother. But, it is now, in hindsight, as I understand my older daughter more, I realized that she was, even at almost 3 years old, taking in this new situation before diving into it. So, that I found to be rather interesting as well.
Yeah. For us, my daughter is a more jump into it if she's into it, and stay the heck away if she's not. And she's very much into the little brother. It was a little tough because if you go back, and we can try and link these in the show notes, but if you go back to our pregnancy and birth episodes, we had 2, as part 1, part 2. And if you go back to those episodes, when my son was born, he was born at about 3:30 in the morning. So we waited until, some things got cleaned up, and, everything's just sort of getting organized. My wife's relaxing. The midwives are taking care of the business, where, filling out birth certificate stuff, all the due diligence. But we still ended up waking my daughter up around 5:15, which is an hour and 15 minutes before she would naturally wake up. And so we bring her in, and she's a little groggy, and I go wake her up, and I go, "Hey, got somebody you want to meet?" And she walks in, and she just sort of looks at him. She takes it in. She's like, "Hi." And that's all she says. She just says, "Hi." And then I asked her, we didn't really discuss, you guys are not alone in how you approached it. I know people that did the name thing where they're like, we want to try them on, see how they fit. We were not like that. We knew what each of our kids was going to be called as soon as we understood what gender. But I asked my daughter, I was like, what should we call him? And I can't tell you what she said, because it was just a random amalgamation of syllables. Like, and I was like, sure. I like that idea. What do you think of
Elon Musk took it.
Yeah. But I go, what do you think of this? And she goes, eh. And I'm like, I have some bad news, champ. It's on the birth certificate already. So she didn't get her way there, but
sure.
She's adjusted. So I will say that it's just like, obviously you can speak more it was a weirder time, couple years ago, still COVID concerns. Your daughter was young, like bring her to the hospital. Your wife's having a C-section, probably not a lot of consideration. So if any of you, because neither one of us for different reasons have experienced like taking a younger child to the hospital, like I can imagine that would be pretty overwhelming for a toddler or a young kid. So if any of you guys have done that, we would love to hear that in the comments, but that's not a specific experience that I think either of us can speak to of sort of being as overwhelmed by that situation. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, we did not do that. We obviously, like I mentioned, left her here with my parents.
But then you bring the kid home, or obviously in our case, the kid's just there. You bring the new kid home, and you just kind of have to adjust a little bit, right? You're now a family of 4. You're no longer a family of you and your pregnant wife, who by the end of it is just kind of trying to get through each day, and your kid who is like, why is mom laying down all the time? Even though it's not that much, but to a toddler, maybe it is, if they're on bed rest or something like that. But even if it's not, it's going to feel like forever with a toddler. Something like that. That it's just one of the things that I can say. And this was really important to us, was the concept of like maintaining our daughter's routine. Other than waking her up a little bit early on that Thursday morning, it was like, okay, you're going to go to school. Like, or I think it was a Thursday, and at that point she was going to my mother-in-law's. Like, you're still going to go to your grandma's house. You're still going to have your day. Then you'll come back here and you'll go to school tomorrow like you do on Fridays. And trying to keep that same routine for her, especially, and then our morning routines, I think is just beneficial. We've talked about this a lot in other episodes for other things like sleep and eating and these kind of just like basic things of like, how do you get your kids to do this consistently? And consistency is the answer. But I think adjusting, like if you think of this as a crazy experiment, if you can control as many variables as possible and make the only change this new person, it can feel less overwhelming to your older kid, because like everything else is there, but they're fitting into my life. My life is not changing because of them. And I think that can help.
So we also maintained the routine. However, what we did was similar to what your mother did with your daughter. I'd say 9 days, just because it fell on a Sunday, 9 days after our second daughter was born, was when my daughter and I started parent accompaniment gymnastics class. So it became that thing that only she and I were doing together. It adds to the routine, obviously, but I think it does so it's a positive change that shows that, hey, it is still you, and there's still one-on-one time with you and your parents. And I would say the hardest thing, other than the trope of going from 2-on-1 zone defense to man when you've got 2 parents and 2 kids, is I realize I kind of fell into the same trap that my parents did, where I don't ever remember getting annoyed or mad or raising my voice when I was just a parent of 1. But when there's a parent of 2 and safety's involved and you're pulled in both directions and you have a situation where you're kind of losing your cool or your focus, and you end up raising your voice or getting mad. These are all things that, no, it did not happen on day 1, like the way my parents traumatized me, but it is something that I realized, and I was actually thinking about this today, knowing we were going to do this episode, just, man, if you just have one kid and you can't keep your temperature in check, you don't have a second one because the second one is when you're going to like really lose your cool every once in a while. That's all I'm gonna say.
This is where I was gonna come in and say I've mellowed out with my second kid and I've had the exact inverse experience as you. But
Okay.
part of this, and I kind of mentioned this in story time with the swim lessons. My daughter is an extremely strong-willed individual.
Right.
You know, she gets that from her mom. But since my wife doesn't listen to the podcast, I can say that. No, but she gets it from her mom. And
yeah, my kids get all the best traits from me, the worst from their mom.
Sure, but my son is not like that. And I actually mellowed out because, like, I'm not saying I was yelling at my daughter all the time, but I get frustrated with her and she get frustrated with me. And we'd both be hard-headed because, let's be honest, I was kidding a little bit earlier. She gets the strong-headedness from both of us and multiplied it, and dang. But, like, with my son, because it's like, hey, man, do this. He's like, okay. And then he does it, and he's sad that he has to do it, but he's still doing it. Mm-hmm. I was very actually conscious when having a second kid. Like, I don't believe in the idea of treating everybody equally because, like each kid equally, because I'm like, they're individual people with individual things like going on and like individual reasons and individual relationships. I'm going to see how many times I can say individual in the next 30 seconds. But the point being, I didn't want to treat them identically, but I wanted to treat them fairly. And I was like, if I'm going to blow my lid, so to speak, or get really upset at my daughter doing something the very first time, and I'm not going to get upset at my son doing it, that's a me issue. And I need to work on that, and I need to understand it. And so it was less of a like 2 kids and more of a like, this kid's different, but I've probably not been handling it the right way with this kid, combined with just the general, like, you're a veteran, right? Mm-hmm. You've been through it. So when you handle it, you know, the first time they do this thing, it's like, I've been down this road. I've been down this road when your sister went through this phase. Mm-hmm. So I know how to handle it, but also I recognize that I'm handling this much better. So let me reflect how I'm going to handle the things that she's got going on too. Because I can improve here. Let's not wait 2.5 years to make these improvements again.
Yeah. So everything you said, I agree with. For me, it was the adjusting to, okay, the last time I was changing a baby's diaper, an infant's diaper explosion, there was not a toddler pulling on my arm that I'm using to wipe the poop. The last time that my kid, I was, giving a bottle to an infant at like on the glider, a toddler didn't run in and scream, "Daddy!" and then have the other one start crying. Right? Yeah. These are the things that
didn't touch him on the tummy.
Yeah, exactly. It's the new experiences that I found myself, that happened. Were the new experience that started happening a lot, where the lesson wasn't getting clear, where, you're really just trying to get something done. And, it happens a lot now. Like I don't like blow up or anything, but, I'll be like mid-sentence talking to my wife and the older kid goes, "Hey, mommy." And then like just dives into a story and we have to be like, please don't interrupt your dad. Like I am lit. Like, do you not hear me talking? Mommy is looking at me. We are. And
my son is right in that phase. Like that has happened 10 times to me in the last 3 days. That I'm like, bro, I was mid-word. Come on. Yeah.
Like
but I get it.
And then it's like, okay, and what was it? Did you know that this table is brown? It's like, I did know this table is brown. Thank you for interrupting my story. to tell me about the table.
It's always that. It's always that.
Yeah.
Watch this. And then he runs and smacks his hand against the door. And I'm like, cool.
Great.
But
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit earlier about the concept of prepping your kid to try and sort of stave off some of the jealousy, but I mentioned it's not avoidable, right? Like
Sure.
it is, in my opinion, maybe there is some child behavioral therapists, psychologists out there that will disprove that notion that if you do X, Y, and Z in ABC manner, you can eliminate jealousy. But eventually it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of got to know how to deal with it, because I think there are two ways you can go. One, you can be mad at the older kid, because usually jealousy isn't going to manifest of like, hey, dad, I really miss time we spent together. They're going to like
Right.
throw something or color on the wall or do something really dumb to try and get your attention. And if you're not prepared for the fact that they're jealous, it's really easy to be like, what behavioral thing is wrong with my kid? And like, stop doing this awful thing. Like, how could you do this?
Mm-hmm.
If you are more prepared, you can sort of, we've talked about the concept of special time before, right? You can, and we've obviously alluded to the idea of one-on-one time, which is not drastically different from special time, but pulling them aside. One thing that I found that was really helpful with my daughter, when I could sort of tell that she was just seeking attention, was obviously pulling her aside and doing something with her. But instead of like just sitting down and being like, we need to talk about this. Like, I can't think of a more mind-numbing thing for a toddler's brain than being like, let's just have a serious conversation heart to heart,
Right.
with no context. So we'd pull out Magnetiles and I'd sit there and play with her and I'd be like, hey, you seem frustrated. Yeah. Are you frustrated because mommy's spending a lot of time with your little brother? Yeah, I just, why does he get all the attention? And then it kind of comes out. And like, you can sort of poke and prod a little bit with maybe not leading questions, but if you kind of have a hunch of what's going on, you can get them to open up. And I found that when I could get her to open up, instead of like trying to jump in front of it and go, hey, I know you're feeling jealous, here's what you should do, but get her to sort of share those feelings with me, then I could come in and go, I hear you. I get that. That must be really tough. And I'm sorry you're feeling that way. Here are some things that I think we can do. And try to be proactive about it. But also, I think it's really, really important. This goes back to before the second kid is born, managing expectations, right? This is one of my favorite things to do in life, is just manage realistic expectations for people. But that includes for your kid of like, they're like, she's not like, you are hungry, I get you a banana. I get you pirate's booty. I get you grapes, whatever the thing is you want. He's hungry, he can do one thing. Again, my wife had about a 12-week maternity leave. Almost said paternity leave. Maternity leave. And we both worked from home. So my son was home for the first year of his life. Dude never took a bottle. Mostly from lack of trying. We just didn't really try it because we didn't need to. Access was there. And so it's just like, hey, daughter, like, it's just not a feasible thing. He's hungry. He's got to eat. And that's the only way he's getting the food. And that means mom's laying down. But here's what we can do. As soon as she's done, I'm going to take your little brother because I need to go to the store. I'm going to take him to the grocery store and get the things I need. That way you and mom have the house to yourself, whatever you guys decide that you want to do. Not putting any onus on my wife of responsibility of doing it, because I think sometimes for my daughter, something as simple as popping on a Disney Plus show and sitting on our bed with one of us, like, fills her bucket of what she needs. So doing those kind of things, also being that supportive parent that is doing what you can to sort of get the baby out of your wife's hair, also not a bad thing.
For sure. Yeah.
For sure.
We weirdly had, you know, in the typical evaluate then participate fashion, the jealousy came like 6 months later. I think she evaluated and then decided to participate in the jealousy. And so it really wasn't immediate. It was just very much her just taking her time, evaluating the situation, and then just being like, you know what? These last 6 months, I don't think I've gotten my fair shake. And now I'm going to react, which is why we say that we never experienced the terrible twos when we had the 3-nager and 4 NATO years. So we'll have to come up with a new term for 5 in a couple months. So
I have to tell you that at a certain point, if you've got to find some disparaging nickname for the phase that your daughter's in for more than half her life, it might just be her personality.
Well, again, I can't, I can't admit to that because she and I have the same personality and I'm great. So no, this is a phase. These are phases.
35 NATO, right?
I'm going to be 30 shits coming up soon.
Okay, yeah.
36.
On that note, I think to sort of wrap up this conversation,
sure.
We had it in our notes to sort of talk about ongoing relationship building, and I think that's a very complicated and nuanced thing, but I don't know that it's terribly deep or terribly interesting. But I figured just to open the floor to what's the relationship like now, right? Obviously, we've had jealousy phases and excitement phases for both of our oldest. What are they like now?
No, my daughters are obsessed with each other, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Despite all of her, phases, she is very much an amazing big sister. And when she says, Daddy, what's your job? And I say, I work for the government. She says, what's my job? And I said, to be the best big sister you can be. And she truly takes that to heart. And my younger daughter, she just wants to do everything her sister does. When they hug each other and they say goodnight, especially now that the almost 2-year-olds full sentences are coming through, but still not, the words aren't exactly right. And it just sounds so sweet. And they, like to have dance parties right before bed. Just, they're the best of friends, and I couldn't be happier. And I hope that lasts forever. So
yeah,
your kids,
I love that. That's her ride or die. They are just same. A lot of that, there was some early on. I have a very vivid memory of we went to a baseball game. It was about minor league baseball game, about 45 minutes away from our house. And we stayed a little long because we were with some friends and things. And it was just, having a good time. But we left a little bit late, especially for my son. He was maybe 6 months old at the time, maybe less. And he's losing it in the back seat because he was still in this very early stage of he had to nurse to sleep almost every time he napped or went to bed. And he was hungry and he's tired. And we're driving, down the Florida Turnpike to get back from the stadium. And he's losing it. And my wife's trying to reassure him. And then my daughter just starts breaking down and she goes, being a big sister is so hard. I just need a break. And we're like, okay, you close your eyes and you take a break. She's like, I can't. He won't stop crying. But now they're ride or die. And my daughter has been up in Massachusetts with my in-laws for 5 weeks now. It'll be 6 weeks soon. And I can tell that they just terribly miss each other. We did a FaceTime this evening and they can do the dumbest stuff and have the best time. My son was running around the house, Pooh Bear in it, because he demands to take off. He's gotten in a habit of You get his underpants on, you get his pants on, socks, shoes, walk out the door. I need to go potty.
Mm-hmm.
And he then mandates that his socks, shoes, pants, and underwear all need to come off. And so in the evenings, the very first time he says he needs to go potty, we just take them all off and we don't put them back on until he goes in his nighttime diaper. And so he's just Pooh Bearing it in a shirt and nothing else all the way around the house and headbutting every time he runs a lap around the couch, headbutting my wife's phone, aka his sister. And she's just cackling. She thinks it's the funniest thing. And he thinks it's the funniest thing. And he's wrestling the dog out of the way so he can headbutt my dog is 90 pounds. He's like wrestling the dog out of the way and headbutting the phone. And they are just absolutely loving each other's company with the most ridiculous stuff. I have videos and pictures. You've seen some of them of my daughter's big into ballet, and he will strap on a tutu and go, let's go. Yep. Swan Lake, Nutcracker. What do we got? You know, he's just ready. It's not that deep. He doesn't actually know the names of ballets because we don't trust him to sit through a performance. So he always misses his sister's recitals, but they are each other's ride or die. And like you, I wouldn't have it any other way, that I know that they are going to be 75 years old talking on the phone with each other every single day about the crazy stuff that they see out their front windows. So
yeah, no, that's wonderful. And it's really funny you mentioned your daughter saying, oh, they won't stop crying. I am always in awe when we do a road trip, which I'll parlay this thought into working on the dad bod. But when the baby's crying, the one person who just doesn't seem to care at all is the older sister. And it's like, she's right next to you. How is that screaming not annoying you? I'm here with my hands on the wheel, and I'm thinking, I hear another minute
that
of this.
Ditch is looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it's like, you're just so cool. How is that possible? And I think kids are just like more tolerant of each other. I wonder if it's like the naps at preschool and nobody falling asleep at the same time and waking up and cry. Like, I don't know. I'm just so curious. But
I know why my daughter doesn't react, because she's got a tablet and headphones on, and she's just like, Mom. Like, be quiet. Your brother's trying to sleep.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like, she's just legitimately just be like, we're like, shut up.
That's funny. Yeah, no, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, working on the dad bod. So I just
love the transition. Nailed the segue. It was so fluid. Keep going.
Thank you. I got relaxed. Did you see that? So yeah, when we last live recorded, it was right after our dad's weekend. We both had the tried to hit our goal weight of 175. Alex cheated. I did not hit it. I got to 182.6, I think. And then, we then had the dad's weekend, ate terribly, drank a lot, didn't move around as much as I wanted to. So, went back up to 188. Yeah, that's true. And then I mentioned I was just on a family vacation. Went to my father-in-law's beach house. We kind of get the resort guest treatment when we go there. I pull up, I park, I unload the car, I set up the girls' rooms, and then I kind of don't do anything other than I drink, I go to the beach, which I will say, every day I was clocking at least 15,000 steps, because the walk to the beach it's not like right on the beach. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
And I did, Apple Watch still works with the water setting, but my stepmother-in-law is a very good cook. They basically, I resorted. I did the all-inclusive beach resort. It just happened to be that was my mode. So when I weighed in tonight, I was a flat 190. Really not happy about it. I feel like, as you can see, I am starting from scratch. But on Tuesday,
We finally got to it.
So on Tuesday, I did have a really good run. I 4.17 miles. Like I was doing really well. I kept it up. I just, the calorie intake far exceeded the outburn, and I'm hoping I can get back to how I was doing, but I really am just starting from scratch. So bad news out of the way. Let's get to your cheating habits on why you're doing so well.
So obviously, if you listened a couple weeks ago, you will know that, as we have jokingly alluded to, I had a stomach virus on our guys' trip, and I ended up, I think, at the peak losing like 12 or 13 pounds. I started the guys' trip at like 181.8 or 182, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't have the exact number in front of me, and lost quite a bit. But I'm still at like 173.8 was what the scale said. And I had sort of talked to Big Game a couple of weeks ago about this idea of like, I'm really excited to like bulk, and I'm really excited to do this. I'm really excited to do that. And I've gotten my appetite back, right? As you can maybe see, I've been sipping. This is beer. Like I've had no problems with anything in getting in my stomach, and I haven't been tracking my calories very well. I haven't been eating crazy. I've just been eating meals, and it's worked out so far. I am going to get back into tracking my calories because I know that, for me, if I just kind of like leave myself to my own devices, I may not weigh in, and then all of a sudden it could be really bad if I'm not paying attention. But I want to shift my focus, since I am below what I considered my ultimate goal weight now, to some interesting things that I'm doing in the gym, or whatever kind of strikes my fancy related to my body. All right. Because your body is more than just calories in, calories out, and the number on the scale, but some interesting things. And one thing, I'll try to link this in the show notes as well. But I've mentioned before that I like to watch YouTube videos from experts that I really trust. And I don't just watch any YouTube video that comes up, but I sort of establish this person's credentials. I listen to what they have to say. I sort of mesh that with my own knowledge of the research or what research they present, kind of thing. And one of these experts that I really like, his name is Ben Patrick. If you have heard of him, you may not even know his name, because he is known as Knees Over Toes Guy. That is like his social media handle, and that is his thing. He is a functional, like, strength mobility sort of rehab expert. He was a D3, D2 college basketball player who had like 5 knee surgeries, and basically through specific exercise selection exercised his way back to being able to do an astrogos squat with a basketball in his hand and then jump straight up and dunk the ball. His skin's the same color as mine, if in case anybody's like trying to figure out, like, it's impressive. It's very impressive what he can do and what his abilities are to do this. But his thing, and it really clicked for me how to sort of describe this on the podcast, because it's something I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of his sort of movements, where he does movements where you essentially do things like get your knees, do lunges or squats where you get your knees really far out over your toes as far as you can while keeping your heels on the ground. And sometimes that might mean like stepping up on a platform. And I won't get into all the specifics because he has an extensive YouTube channel. He's on all the social media platforms. Just search Knees Over Toes Guy and you can find it. Again, I'll try to put some links in the description. But the idea is training at these end ranges of motion in a controlled way, not trying to like do this with 225 pounds on your back, but doing this with your body weight, and then doing it with 10 pounds and progressing until eventually you can do it with that, can strengthen the ligaments, strengthen the joints, and strengthen all the little supporting muscles that prevent injuries. And I've never been a very mobile or flexible person, but in my weightlifting, one thing I have found is that doing things like bench presses where I really stretch, and rows where I'm really stretching on this other end, have improved my mobility. So I've taken this concept into what I'm doing in the gym, and I just find it super fascinating how, like, I can lift almost no weight except my body weight. But because like my strength level is so much lower at these sort of severe end ranges, I get really sore, like I have done heavy squats or heavy deadlifts. And I had another expert who is sort of my go-to on hypertrophy, aka muscle growth, who does a video series on his YouTube channel where he critiques other experts. And so he was critiquing Ben Patrick's videos. And Ben does his classic ATG split squat, as he calls it, where his back leg is straight and his front knee is going as far as possible with his foot flat. And he does this thing and his hamstring is touching his calf, right? And he's just straight out here. And this other expert who's critiquing it goes, does this look painful to you? If it does, that is a you problem. And I mean that in the worst way. You should be, if something like that feels like it hurts, I'm not saying jump into that position, but train to get there instead of running away from the pain. And so that's something that I've just kind of been trying to do of like, okay, yeah, I've never been able to squat really deep. I don't have a ton of calf flexibility. I don't have a ton of flexibility anywhere. I don't know. I don't need to list all the muscles. I'm not a very flexible person. And so the end result has been like, I find modifications and ways to not get into like compromised positions with heavy weights instead of using light weights in the compromised positions to train myself up so I can do better. So if anybody out there, I'm not here prescribing something, but like if you were having back pain or knee pain or joint pain, I think the natural reaction sometimes is to just shy away from it. And I think that there is power in finding good resources and good people and good coaching that can safely guide you through how to get back to movement in that area, and your recovery, my hypothesis, can actually be better by like just strengthening those things under control. So that's something I've been working on because I'm like, I am really tired of doing squats and doing deadlifts and then having like low back pain and hip pain and a little bit of crunchiness going on. I'm like, I want to fix this instead of just putting on a billboard of like, this is my strength goal, and anything that gets in my way can, go fly a kite or whatever.
Yeah, I'll be lying if I said I've done weightlifting any time recently, but for that very same reason, what I did as I got older, I'm not a high school football player anymore, but instead of doing all of the exercises that I did with as much weight as possible, trying to get as strong as I could, I still do all the same exercises, but I do a lot lower weight and just a lot higher rep. I care more about the, for example, I don't need to deadlift 180 pounds 4 times or whatever I was doing back then. I can't remember if that's good, but I can do
I'll deadlift more than that. I'm weak.
Oh,
just kidding.
Yeah, I don't know, but I could do. The last time I was working out, I was doing
bench press more than that in college, so that's not true number. Okay. I know that.
Okay,
unless you had the worst deadlift of all time.
No, my deadlift, my cling was terrible. I could not. I was not cling good. Just that. So that's what I meant. But like, I really like the Roman deadlift. I really like the Roman deadlift exercise. And with the Roman deadlift, you're basically, for those of you who don't know, you're doing everything kind of as straight as possible. I used to be able to do that with a lot of weight. I don't remember what it was. But when I was last working out, being in my 30s, I care more about, can I do this 50 times with 50 pounds? Because when in my life am I going to just be like, you know what? I need to grab this 200-pound item while keeping my back perfectly straight. And that's definitely like a realistic thing I'm going to be doing, So it's just kind of how I view the stuff.
Yeah. And I think there's some value in that. I've heard, and this is totally anecdotally, like the other side of it of like, there's some downside, right? Thinking about like movement patterns as I'm talking about, like if you do 50 reps and you have bad form, that is 50 times your body's moving in a bad way versus 4 times and then you're like, thanks, get me out of here. Right. The stress of the heavy weights usually, I think, again, anecdotally, tends to lead to more of those kind of joint issues. But again, it's sort of, I think there's a working up to it, right? I understand that you have some limitations just in your equipment that's available to you as someone who works out based out of your home exclusively. But for those of you that may have access to more equipment at your own home or go to a gym or whatever, like, I think Ethan's point is valid that, like, do things at lighter weights. And I don't know, just as we get old, like, I'm starting to realize, because what's happened is, like, I just used a lot of bro science when we got to college, and I had never lifted before. I played tennis in high school, right? I didn't need to lift. And so, like, I got to college and I'm just listening to my roommate or some of our fraternity brothers. It's like, bro, you got to train shoulders on Tuesdays for maximum protein absorption, that kind of just absolute crap. And as a result, it's just like, get the weight up. And, looking back, I'm like, I developed a lot of problems that I'm now paying the price for because I did it wrong. And I was very concerned as a dude in college who was on some level probably trying to peacock that, like, I need as many plates or the biggest dumbbell I can possibly do so that I don't look like a wimp.
Right. Yeah.
In front of the ladies or in front of the bros, man. Because you have the other fraternities there. You're like, can't let them show me up.
It's true.
They're the nerds.
It's true. Yeah. Anyway. In like the weird way, I definitely cared more about impressing guys at the gym than girls. In the sense that it was more about competition. You know what I mean?
I hear that. And I understand that mentality. Like, the difference was you came in having trained for weight in football. And if you remember, one of our good friends and I trained for like a semester together and had some really good success there. And he liked training with me more than you. And the difference was simply like, when we were doing bench press and when you were doing bench press, we had to add another 45 plate to the bar on each side versus what we were doing because we had both just kind of started in our lives doing it. And so I think there's some of it of like, that is a very fine mentality when you don't think you're in like the 20th percentile. I see on like Instagram and TikTok a lot, this meme. It's from it's from Star Wars, the prequel trilogy. And it's just like, when you go to a new gym, like, and it's like, and you see who's stronger than you, and it's Hayden Christensen, Anakin Skywalker going, it's not just the men, it's the women and the children too. And it's like, that's kind of how I feel, like how I felt in college. Now I feel fine, mostly because I go to the YMCA that's mostly populated by people who qualify for Medicare. So I'm not worried, but I have actually gotten people coming up asking me like, hey, like, why do you do this? Or what are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, like, thanks. And like, had a guy come up to me and go, man, you could do a lot of push-ups. I was like, thanks. I was a set of 15. I'm a beast. You can just call me Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, I'm just like, the standard between college gym and my local YMCA is just different. And so like, I get to be a little more king of the jungle.
And I will say, I appreciate the way Alex framed this, but it wasn't like I was just like picking up girls right and left in the gym. Especially, you know what I mean? So it was like,
but here's the thing. Yeah. Everybody thought they were going to, and nobody did.
Yeah.
Like, that's a simple reality that is.
Right. But I also knew that, the trope of hitting on a girl at the gym, it's never as good as it is on TV. Right. So girls hate being hit on when they're working out. So my mentality was kind of like, this is really just like, I feel like I could lift more than
like
that
I put
guy.
my AirPods in on noise cancel mode. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously not. I'm not getting hit on at the gym. Like not something I've done or had happen to me. I don't like anybody talking to me at the gym. I'm
Yeah,
like,
no
I am in a
problem with that.
zone listening to college football podcast and
Yeah.
like being angry at this weight is my
Exactly.
mentality. And like, don't bother me, you know, because usually, again, maybe because of the demographic, they have time on their hands. I watch these people do a set, have a 10-minute conversation, do a set, have a 10-minute conversation. I'm like, I've got to be out of here by 8:45 so I can get my son to daycare and I can get myself to my desk at time. Like, get out of my way. I got sets to finish.
So on that note, listeners, you probably want to get out of here. You probably got stuff to do. We've kept you here for 75 minutes now. Thank you guys for your time. As always, thank you so much for working on the Dad Pod with us. Please like and subscribe, send to your friends. We will never go this long again. So thank you so much.
We probably will, but not next week.
Not next week. All right. Thanks, everybody, and appreciate it.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.